Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be discussing Bowlby's attachment theory. If you're new here, my name is Valeria, and I want to start off the video by asking a very common parenting question. The question is, do you think that letting your baby cry to self-soothe will help them regulate their own emotions and later become more independent? Do you maybe think that giving them too much attention will spoil them? Well, this is a really good question, and it's a very common question, like I mentioned. And I think that the answer kind of depends on who you ask. It can depend on that person's age, maybe their cultural background, maybe what a parent told them, or a grandparent told them, or their aunt told them, or just maybe how many kids they have and how much experience they have with kids. So the only reason I want to bring this up is because I want you to see how this information that we're going to discuss is very practical. What good is it to have information and just fun facts if it doesn't really apply to your day-to-day life? Well, hopefully after watching this video, if you hear somebody ask this question or they ask yourself, now you can provide some really good information and valuable information for them to consider. So John Bowlby believed that early childhood experiences played a really important role in development and then in adult behavior. He believed that when you were a child, you had a caregiver that you had a very healthy relationship with, and they made you feel loved and you felt accepted by them, then you would grow up to have a very strong sense of self. So what is attachment? Well, in short, it's just the bond or connectedness between two people. And there are three components to attachment. The first component is going to be alarm. This is when the baby is alarmed in some way. For some reason, they're triggered, and it just makes the baby, freak out for some reason. And this trigger may be internal or external. It could be that the baby has a tummy ache, or maybe its environment is just too loud. So you're going to know that the baby is in this alarm state because they're going to express a need in the only way they know how. They're going to cry. They don't have the words yet to let you know what is wrong, so you're going to hear them crying. The second component is going to be seeking comfort. The baby is going to seek comfort from the caregiver. They want somebody to provide relief for that alarm, whether it's a blanket, whether it's food. So the third component is going to be deactivation. So let's say that the caregiver went ahead and gave the baby food, or maybe wrapped them in a blanket, or maybe gave them medicine for their pain, and so the baby can now go back to being, their usual selves, and they're going to go back to doing whatever they were doing before, whether it is play or exploration. So as you can imagine, if the baby is never soothed or comforted, they're going to be in extreme distress. And I think it is really important to note that it doesn't have to be an ache or a pain that the baby is feeling in order for an alarm to go off. It could just be that the baby is wanting to see their caregiver. Maybe at this point, the caregiver is the child's secure base, and so they may freak out whenever they are away for an extended period of time, or maybe they just don't see them and they're a little bit alarmed and they're just seeking that attention. And it could be that the caregiver is fully aware that there's nothing physically wrong with the baby, so maybe they won't come to them to soothe them or carry them because they're just wanting attention. And regardless of the baby not being in pain, this is going to cause the baby a lot of distress because they're not being comforted and they're not getting that attention that they're needing to go back to a relaxed state. According to Bowlby's attachment theory, there are 4 stages of attachment development. The first stage is going to be pre-attachment. This is when the baby doesn't really care who is caring for them. As long as the baby is warm and safe and fed, they don't have a preference to a specific caregiver. The second stage is going to be attachment in the making. This is when the baby is starting to have a preference to one caregiver. Being away from this caregiver does not necessarily cause the child any distress, but they do respond better, maybe quicker, to this one specific person. The next phase is the clear-cut phase, and at this point you can see some separation anxiety from that person that the child has deem their preferred caregiver. At this point, it's really obvious who this person is. This is a person that they tend to go to whenever they need something, the person they may reach their little arms for if maybe they're scared or overwhelmed. And because they're using this person as a secure base, whenever they are away from this person, it could cause some distress and separation anxiety. Then there is goal-corrected partnership. At this point, they work together as a team, as a partnership, the caregiver and the baby, and they have mutual trust and even mutual influence on one another. I'm sorry guys, you're gonna have to excuse my cat. She really wants to be in this shot. So as I mentioned before, it could be that the child is using their caregiver as a secure base, and basically Bowlby believed that children who were able to use their primary caregiver as a secure base to play and explore were able to be more independent. They were also a lot less anxious than children who did not have this secure base. So you may be wondering, how do you know if a baby is securely attached? How do you assign a type of attachment? How do you measure that? What do you look for? Well, Mary Ainsworth went on to create something called the strange situation. The strange situation is a procedure that involves the baby, a complete stranger, and the main caregiver, which is usually the mother. From watching babies during the strange situation, observers were able to pinpoint 4 specific patterns of behavior and then assign an attachment style to each. So the first one is going to be secure attachment, and this is a winner. This is the good one, the one that you want. So in this specific scenario, when mom and baby are in the same room, the baby is going to be very engaged in play and exploration because they have that secure base in the room. They're able to kind of be very independent, go their own way. However, they do check in on mom occasionally. They aren't necessarily super preoccupied with mom's location. It's not like they're fearing abandonment or anything like that. They just check in every once in a while, make sure mom is still where they were the last time that they looked over. Because their secure base is in the room, they're actually pretty friendly towards the stranger. But as you can imagine, as soon as the mom leaves the room, the baby becomes very distressed and they may cry. And what's really important to note is that when the mom comes back, they're really happy to see mom, and they're actually really easily comforted and almost really forgiving. You know, they're really happy to see mom even though mom left, and they love to be soothed and comforted by this person. Ainsworth did go on to note that the parents of children who exhibited secure attachment tended to be very responsive to their children's needs. Then there's anxious avoidance. In this scenario, the baby is too preoccupied with playing and checking out their environment to care about what mom is doing. They never check up on mom. They never look over. Whenever mom does leave the room, the baby is not fazed. And whenever the mom comes back, again, the baby is not interested. They're not amused. They seem to be a lot more entertained by their environment than with whatever the caregiver is up to. Some psychologists do believe that this behavior could be due to maybe a caregiver who is pretty emotionally detached or disengaged with their child. Then there's anxious resistant. Anxious resistant is a type of insecure attachment, and when the mom and the baby are in the same room, the baby is way too preoccupied with mom's location to kind of fully engage and play. When the mom leaves the room, the baby is very distressed, very upset. They do cry, and when the mom comes back into the room, they are happy to see mom, but they're very upset. They don't want to be comforted. They're very resistant to being comforted by the caregiver, and there's kind of like an angry tone to it. They seem very indignant that the mother left, and some researchers do believe that this behavior is a result of maybe a caregiver who only takes care of the child and provides the child's needs on their own terms. Then there's disorganized attachment, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is when the baby's behavior is very disorganized and very unpredictable. When the mom and the baby are in the room, the baby is fine, and then they will just start crying, or maybe they'll be in a lot of distress, and then they'll get up and just be perfectly fine. They're very unpredictable, and they have very strong bursts of emotions. Some researchers do think that it could be due to neglect, while other people also think that it could be a result of unresolved trauma or maybe loss in the parents' lives that in some way reflect in their parenting towards the child, and then the child expresses that in disorganized attachment. So as you can imagine, this causes babies a lot of stress because it involves the mom walking out on them. So Everett Waters went on to create something called the AQS, which stands for Attachment Cue Sort. And in this scenario, the mom and the baby are just observed while they're playing and doing their own thing, and the observer has a deck of cards. It can be 75, maybe 100 cards, and it has very descriptive sentences on them. One of them can say something along the lines of, baby readily shares with mom, or something like that. And then they just compile a score based on the cards that most describe the baby or least describe the baby, and then they're able to assign an attachment style based on that score. So obviously this method is super awesome for the baby. The baby's no longer stressed out, but also there are cultural differences for which the strange situation is not appropriate. For example, when the baby and the mom are away, it could be that it's like the baby's first time being away from the mom, so they're going to act out in a way that doesn't necessarily help measure attachment style. The baby will probably be really affected by this because in some cultures the baby and the mom don't really leave each other's side. And so the AQS is really awesome in this scenario because 1, the baby's not under stress, 2, it can be used in cultures where the mom and the baby don't leave each other's side, and 3, it can be used anywhere. It doesn't have to be in the playroom, in the lab, anything like that. It can be used anywhere. So why does this information matter? Well, it can follow us into adulthood. Whatever our attachment style was as a child, it could still be our attachment style. And as we just discussed, you can see that our caregivers' availability and perhaps state, whether that be mental or emotional state, could have impacted our own development and now our behavior as adults. Now, it doesn't have to be that way. It could be that your attachment style has changed over the years. It could be for the better or it could be for the worse. Now, to address the question that I brought up in the beginning of this video, I really want to reiterate Bowlby's and Ainsworth's main points. So a main point of Bowlby's attachment theory is that responsive and sensitive care is really important for a child to go on and have a very healthy social and emotional development. So basically, sensitive and comforting parenting is essential. Ainsworth believed that the behavior that the child exhibited during the strange situation was reflective of the quality and kind of care that the child was receiving at home. Therefore, those children that had responsive and consistent care tended to have secure attachment, while those children who had parents that were kind of inconsistent and not that responsive tended to have a type of insecure attachment. So that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new, and I'll see you guys on Saturday.